Hello, welcome to the Inside the Birds pregame show. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside my Inside the Birds co-host Adam Caplan. And joining us all season long, we've got the king of tape breakdown, Greg Cosell. Fellas, welcome back. The Eagles are home in South Philly tonight at the Link for the first time. They're coming off a 34-29 win over the Packers in the opener in Brazil. It almost feels like 5 weeks ago now. There's
It
been so
sure
much
does.
football in between, right? Uh, but finally, the Eagles get back on the field in front of their fans. They'll face a new look Falcons team that fell in their season opener. They lost 18-10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers at home in Atlanta. So we will spend the next hour breaking down this game, getting through it from A to Z. And as always, we're going to start with the injuries. Okay, on offense, there are big injuries, one in particular for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is A.J. Brown, who is out with a hamstring injury. Now, here's the deal. It tightened up in practice on Friday. Nick Sirianni said on Saturday they withheld him. And Adam, surprisingly, Sunday, they declared it pretty early that he was going to be out of the game.
Yeah, good for them. They did it after their walkthrough, so they knew he wasn't going to play. You do the right thing. The league encourages teams, if they know a guy's not going to play, to downgrade the player 24 hours before the game. They did that. Now we have that clarity, and it makes it a little bit easier to go inside what this may look like. But look, it happened in practice. So did Johnny Wilson's. We'll get to his, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah, so Johnny Wilson, as Adam just mentioned, Greg, questionable with a hamstring. So we'll see how that goes. Now, maybe they're being precautious with AJ Brown and, with 15 more games to play after that. Who knows? But Greg, the point is they were already thin at wide receiver, and we've already seen what it looks once this Eagles team without AJ Brown. It was in the playoffs last year against Tampa Bay, and it wasn't pretty. But you have a new offense now here, different concepts, but it's clearly, this is AJ Brown's top guy. I'm sorry, Jalen Hurts' top guy.
No question. But I think that with Kellen Moore and the way he approaches offense and with his formation variation, and I think that, again, I'm not suggesting that without AJ Brown everything's fine, because obviously you're dealing with arguably a top 5 receiver in the league, so things are different. But I think you'll see a lot more use of perhaps the pony package, and we can get into that a little more as well, where they play 2 running backs. I think you'll see Grant Calcaterra get some more snaps in 12 personnel packages. Both Calcaterra and Dallas Goedert can split from the formation. So there are ways to deal with it. Obviously, he's a terrific receiver, and you always want your best players out there. But, again, we're not doctors. I just think it's smart, though, because you're dealing with a muscle injury. And, we've heard so much about lower extremity muscle injuries, calves, hamstrings. Those things linger. And the last thing you want in week 2 is for A.J. Brown to be lost for 6 or 8 or 10 weeks.
Right. Adam, as Greg just mentioned, there's ways to work around not having a guy like A.J. Brown formationally,
Yep.
using different personnel. But we can't also deny that A.J. Brown brings a presence, a physical presence, a tenacious presence,
Yep.
a almost safety valve, and I can throw it to that guy even if he's really covered, and that guy can make a play.
Yeah.
As we've talked about going into the year, the Eagles better pray they stay healthy at this position, because they really, outside of Devontae Smith, who is a playmaker, certainly, and he will be a big point of emphasis tonight, and we'll talk about it later a little bit as far as what they do, but you really lack, when you're the Eagles, and you saw this against the Bucs last year, that kind of presence. And I don't know from a personnel standpoint, we know Goddard's tough. We know Devontae Smith can make plays, but when this guy is out, it's a real challenge for them to establish themselves.
It's going to be hard. Look, it's going to be hard. It's just a different deal. Here's one guy who would probably see a lot of AJ Terrell in terms of, okay, we know the Falcons may play, depending on which week it is, they may play a lot of zone comparatively to man. But I think this is a game where you want to make sure you don't let AJ Brown get loose. But it doesn't matter now. He's out. Devontae is physical for guys thin as he is, but again, he's not physical like AJ Brown, so it's going to be a problem. They've got Goddard. Greg mentioned Goddard, who I'm expecting to have a really good game, very active. I'm expecting that to happen here. And then Calcaterra, Geoff, I know you mentioned this a couple months ago before they made the Dawson trade, that when they play 12 personnel, he more or less could be a receiver instead of a tight end. And I would look at him more as a receiver. I agree with you. And I saw him play a lot of slot tight end in training camp. So you're right. That's coming here. I don't think there's any question about it. Now, if Johnny Wilson doesn't play, you're probably going to see Paris Campbell in there. That would make the most sense, who could play inside or outside. But it's never anything you really want to see. But I am very interested to see the use of running backs without A.J. Brown.
Yep. And as you mentioned, Paris Campbell, a good candidate for elevation and to be able to play in this game. On the positive side, Isaiah Rodgers, one of their better cornerbacks in camp, who missed the opener because of a broken hand, practiced this week and is expected to play tonight. That'll be interesting, Greg and Adam, because Quinyon Mitchell, as you pointed out, Greg, and we'll talk about later in this show, played fairly well in your eyes, especially for a rookie. Isaiah Rodgers was the guy on the outside all throughout camp. You know, him and Ringo a little bit early on. Then it was Rodgers with Mitchell inside. Be interesting to see what kind of role Rodgers has now that he's ready to play.
That's a great point.
Also, how limited he might be if he's playing with his hand wrapped.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Mitchell played extremely well on the outside against the Packers. I'd be hard-pressed to remove him as a starter, but I'm not there. I'm not them. I know Rodgers was probably expected to be the starter on the outside before the injury. So, again, we don't know the answer to that. It's very possible that they could go with Rodgers on the outside and move Mitchell in the slot, where he did play significant snaps in training camp and in the preseason games. I would not personally, just based on what I've seen on tape, and that's all I can go by, I would not like to see Mitchell taken off the field. I think Mitchell should be on the field.
He will be. So the way that they did it to close camp is before Rodgers broke his hand is that in base and when they weren't in nickel or sub packages, Mitchell's the outside corner. In nickel, they moved Mitchell inside and Rodgers outside. But here's the wrench. And I want to get Greg's tape's opinion on this. We know Maddox was the nickel corner last week. He gave up some plays. So Greg, what did the tape tell you? What did it show you about Avonte Max's performance last week?
Well, I would answer it this way. If Rodgers is going to play, Mitchell would be my slot corner, not Maddox. And to me, that's not even a question. So, Maddox, as you guys know, ended up playing a lot of safety during training camp. And actually, maybe you guys weren't surprised because you deal more with that than I do. But I was surprised to see him at slot corner in the first game. But maybe that was a function of injury because I know he did play some snaps of slot corner in the preseason games, but he played a ton of safety. And then obviously Bradbury got hurt as well, and he's out for at least I guess another 6, 7, 8 weeks. But I would keep Mitchell on the field. I think Mitchell is had a really good opener. I think he's your first round pick. He had a good camp. He's a better player than Maddox.
Yeah. Well, wants and needs are different things in the NFL. Vic Fangio has been very open. He wants Quinyon Mitchell to be his outside corner and to just stay there.
See, I agree with that. I mean, Vic Fangio's smarter than I am about his defense, clearly. Yes. But I personally think that Mitchell should stay on the outside. I mean, Mitchell, look, he's a rookie. So could he come out and have bad plays? Of course, that's going to happen. I don't want people to think I'm suggesting he's the best corner in the league. He's going to have bad plays. That's normal in the course of a rookie's development, particularly at the corner position where even the best corners get beat. But I think Mitchell has the size, has the length, has the speed, has the ability to be a really higher level outside corner in this league. And I would not yo-yo him in and out. I would keep him on the outside.
Geoff, one thing to add. Okay, here's the caveat or the interesting point going forward here. Cooper DeJean, I know he didn't play very much last week. At some point, we expect him to play nickel, right? We know that's going to happen at some point. I'm not saying it's this week because this is a little early, but at some point, and we all seem to agree on this, Mitchell needs to be an outside corner. If DeJean's a nickel, if he runs up being that's ultimately their best grouping when you look at all the players.
Certainly something to watch for tonight, as Cooper DeJean did play in the opener. He played
he only played in dime.
A handful of snaps as a dime backer. We'll see if his role gets expanded. That's why I talked about wants versus needs. How much can Vic Fangio tolerate having a nickel corner not getting the job done as well? So that'll be a big question going into tonight. Last thing on injury standpoint, Devin White back. He missed the opener. by now everybody knows this. Devin White is not a starter. He's been told he's not a starter. Nakobe Dean is the starter. So despite starting all camp, despite playing, almost seemingly being the guy, he is not the guy. And I think the question now is, and this goes back to them signing Oren Burks from the practice squad to give themselves a sixth inside linebacker, which is a lot for any team. Is Devin White active tonight? I think that becomes the very big question, because as he even said in the locker room, he's not sure what his role is. And if you don't know what your role is, it's because you probably haven't been told that you definitely have a role yet. So I think that's
a really
interesting
question. I mean, he's not an old player. They signed him. He's good at certain things. So I'm curious. That's a great question, Geoff, because as soon as you said that he's told he's not a starter, the first thing that went through my mind was, well, is he going to play in the nickel? Because he's a very good pass rusher. He's not a great coverage player. But I guess we're going to find that out.
Absolutely. I know it's been wondered if they'll convert him into an edge rusher, because he is a good blitzer, and the Eagles didn't generate a lot of pressure in the opener. But I think that's a little bit further down the road for now. We'll have to just see if Nick Sirianni did say we're going to need him and he's going to have a role for us, but that could have also been,
and that could just be, happy talk.
Yeah.
Coach speak, right.
And remind us of the contract.
Well, sometimes that happens. I mean, I watched the Commanders tape this week, and Jamin Davis is now an edge rusher.
Right.
Just want to add a couple injury notes here. So Tyler Steen, they added him Saturday. I'm assuming it's the same ankle, but he took all the normal backup reps. He'll be available. And Milt Williams, by the way, that was the one injury, Geoff, that we didn't know about. It was not listed coming out of the game. He had a foot injury, but he was cleared, so he'll be good to go. Because that when I saw that one, I'm like, because we know Mauro Jones is backup, but that you want to make sure that these guys are playing. Fred Johnson has a new injury this week with the thumb. He's been cleared.
All right, we'll switch sides here to the Atlanta Falcons. They have an injury at the linebacker spot. Their starting linebacker, Nate Landman, dealing with a calf issue, and he will be out for the game. So it looks like their starting linebackers, mostly two linebacker defense, will be Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis.
And Anderson played. He played in the nickel anyway. So they didn't play any snaps of dime. He played nickel, and Landman came out. So he played nickel with Caden Ellis.
Okay, so Landman was mostly a run defender for them anyway?
Yeah, he played essentially in their base, yeah.
Gotcha.
They played a lot of base last week. They played a lot of base last week because they played the Steelers, who line up with a lot of multiple tight ends, which, of course, the Eagles could be doing that as well based on the conversation we just had. But Landman did not play in the nickel. So Anderson, played a lot of snaps last year. It's not as if they're bringing some guy in who hasn't played.
Right. They'll also be without defensive back Antonio Hamilton Sr. I believe he has a groin injury and has been out of practice. Was he a part of their defense that was significant or important?
He would have been a dime corner at best.
Okay.
He's been around. We all know he's been around for got to be 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, he's been with a lot of teams,
6 or 7 teams. Yeah,
but he did not play in their base or their nickel. So
yeah, he was out last week. He was hurt.
Yeah, he didn't play at all. A good news for them, offensive tackle Caleb McGarry, who was dealing with a groin, was a limited participant on Friday and Saturday after not being a participant earlier in the week. So they're expecting him to be all right to go.
Yeah, he was trying to get over the fact that he had to block T.J. Watt last week.
Is that? Oh, okay. All right.
And there were a number of snaps in which that did not go well.
Remember we talked about that, Adam, in the podcast. I said I watched some eyesore tape of them trying to block T.J. Watt, and it did not go well. That's correct.
Watt lost 2 sacks in that game. That gives you an idea of what Greg just talked about. So, oh boy.
We'll get to this, but it's funny. They actually have a good old line, but it played poorly last week. So it'll be interesting going forward.
Yeah. Greg, that's a great transition. We're going to get into this, we're going to start off with the Eagles offense and the O-line against the Falcons defense. So you did see the Falcons on defense. They only allowed 270 yards to the Steelers and 4.1 yards per play. They were leaky on third down. I believe the Steelers converted almost 30%.
They did, but that was deceptive, Geoff, because Fields only had 9 dropbacks on third down, even though the Steelers were 8 for 17 on third down. And Fields was 5 for 6 for 33 yards. He was sacked twice. There were 6 called runs on third down. So it was an odd third down kind of game.
Right.
So keep in mind that he had 9 quarterback dropbacks. Only 2 of the 9 dropbacks resulted in first down completion. So it was an odd and a deceptive third down number.
Got it.
Here's what all you need to know about how bad the Steeler offense was. They kicked 6 field goals. They didn't score.
Yeah.
Not good.
All right, well, let's look at the challenge ahead for the Eagles offense without A.J. Brown against an Atlanta Falcons defense, Greg, that I know we have to take into account that their opening game was against the Steelers, and Steelers right now are finding themselves offensively. But the Falcons did do well. They only allowed 270 total yards in the game. Some of those third downs they gave up were a little bit tricky. So what Kellen likes to do. He likes to spread it out. He likes to be formationally diverse, which he'll still do. But against this Falcons defense, and especially their secondary, how big's the challenge right now? And what do you think Kellen goes to replace the production?
Just a quick note about the Falcons defense. Last week, they played a ton of zone. And my sense is that they played a high percentage of zone because of the offense they were playing against. Because you know that Justin Fields is going to drop it down and run. And he did quite a bit. In fact, he had a number of runs on third down. Now, that could be their MO. Because I think Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake, I think they're probably more zone coordinator types than man, but we'll see. But I think when it comes to Kellen Moore, I think you're dealing with a guy that is really good at playing to what his personnel is. Now, keep in mind, we know A.J. Brown's a terrific receiver. He's normally their boundary X. In other words, when you line up with 3 receivers to one side and a single receiver to the boundary, the short side of the field, that's normally A.J. Brown. You always want to have that receiver who can win one-on-one matchups, because you get a lot of those with your boundary X. So a couple of thoughts. Number one, you might not see as much 3-by-1 sets, or you might see what we call 1-by-3 sets. We saw that a bit last week. By 1-by-3, that means that it's a tight end who's the single receiver. And they have 2 tight ends who can fill that role. Certainly Dallas Goedert can, and Calcaterra can as well. I remember watching him back in his Oklahoma days when he was one of the most athletic tight ends in college football. So you could certainly see that. You could certainly see more 2-by-2 sets. You're certainly going to see the same kind of use of motion, which in their first game, they used a ton of motion. And that allows receivers to get free access into routes and changes the look for the defense. So there's many ways to make up for it tactically. Obviously, you don't have that one guy on the outside that, Jalen obviously feels comfortable throwing it to 1-on-1, but you can make up for it schematically and tactically.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, Adam, something we talked about a lot. It happened in the opener once, and we made a big deal about it, this great wheel route to Saquon Barkley that turned into a touchdown. But in total, Adam, I believe Barkley only had 2 catches in the game. The wheel route touchdown and another when Jalen was under duress. Kenny Gainwell caught a pass, made some people miss.
Yeah.
Will Shipley was able to get in there. Perhaps the running backs catching the ball, attacking the edges with these guys is finally a little bit more part of the game plan.
Yeah, I like the point that Greg made about pony package, because Shipley, I get he's not Gainwell in terms of stuff he's done in the past game as a pro, because Shipley's a rookie and he just played his first game, but Shipley's got great short area quickness. You got to create, like if you're a coordinator without your best receiver, you got to kind of create plays. And out of 21 personnel, you can do that. Out of Pony, you could do that. Now, Jahan Dotson's a guy. I know he was in motion a lot the first game. He didn't do a lot. He got the one target. That one was almost picked off. But this guy was a former first-round pick. He's available. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do there. But the big one is Goddard. Goddard now without Brown is going to get more pass targets. He's got to get more pass targets. We've talked about this with Greg for years. You can line up your tight end at the X position. Every team does it just about. Mm-hmm. So there are things you can do to answer your question. You're not going to make up for it totally. It's impossible. But the things you could do to alleviate this issue.
So I want to go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, Geoff, and that's another reason, thinking about the matchup in this game, keep in mind the Falcons have 2 really good safeties who are very savvy and do a great job working between the numbers, Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons, which to me signifies even more that Goddard will be a detached player quite a bit. Because this is a tough team to throw in the middle of the field, which we know isn't Jalen Hurts' strength to begin with. And with these 2 safeties, that's a little tough. Jesse Bates is one of the best in the league at baiting quarterbacks. He's really, really good at that. So you could see Goddard. The other thing is that pony package we spoke about, which is 2 running backs. Okay, we saw that, I think, 4, 5, 6 snaps last week with Shipley and Barkley. And I think Shipley was the motion man most of the time, although I think Barkley was one time. You could see more of that. You could see those guys detached from the formation. Don't forget the Barkley touchdown was a specifically designed play for, basically in the high red zone. It was, you're not going to run that same play every single week because now it's out there. You can run similar things, but you're not going to run that exact play.
I want to ask a question that is not a matchup-based question, which we normally try to avoid on our show, but I think it's a fair question, and I'll get both of your insights on it. Jalen Hurts, because Greg, you just talked about the quarterback being baited by the safety there, and so obviously a lot falls on Jalen Hurts' shoulders this year. He's setting protections more. He's doing more. He loses his top weapon, but he's also the highest paid guy in the offense and is someone who the rest of the offense is going to look at to pick up his game. Had 2 interceptions last week in the opener, almost had 2 others. Adam, I don't think that there should be, if he does not play well, I don't think that you didn't have A.J. Brown at this point in his career is a fair excuse when now you have Saquon Barkley, you have Devontae Smith, you have Dallas Goedert. The point I'm trying to make is if he doesn't play well, he should have still played well. I get you don't have A.J. Brown, but the best quarterbacks in this league, they lose guys all the time.
Sure.
And they have to figure out a way.
Sure.
So do you guys see it the same way? Like there shouldn't be any excuses. Like you go out there and put 7 or less points on the board. That's not just because
you got to see you got to see let the game play out. You got to see where guys open because the tape will tell you were they getting open? He wasn't throwing it because he's so reliant on A.J. Brown. You got to see. You just got to see peripherally how this thing looks. But sure, if you want to be a great quarterback, you've got to be able to do it when certain guys aren't available. I'm not saying I'm not comparing him to Brady, but Brady did it for years when the pass target group wasn't great. You make others around you better. That's a sign of great quarterback play. And also for Kellen Moore, I've mentioned this before in our show, Geoff. I ran into on my training camp tour, a coach who worked with him in Dallas, and he said that one of the things that Kellen did a great job is never forcing a situation where, okay, he wanted to be heavy 11 and some 10 personnel. If you don't have the personnel, you got to readjust. So I would expect 12 personnel and figuring out a way to get scheme guys open. It's not easy. I'm sure they had a pretty good idea once Brown was unable to practice late in the week that he wasn't going to play. And it's not like these guys have never coached before without their best players. So this is fascinating, guys. Not that you want this to happen, but this is the first big test for Kellen Moore. How to use this personnel. I'm fascinated to see what the thing's going to look like tonight.
And I think you're both right, Geoff. You expect a great quarterback, and certainly Jalen's had moments where we could say that, and he certainly paid like one. You expect a great quarterback to play at his highest level in a situation like this. But Adam's also 100% right. You have to see how it plays out. There's a lot that's put on the offensive coordinator in this kind of situation to scheme things up so you can define things for Jalen Hurts so he doesn't feel like every throw has to be a tough throw and a tough read. So there's so many variables here. There's not one answer, but from a 30,000 foot point of view, yes, you're both right. I mean, you would expect Jalen Hurts has to play a really good game in terms of doing all the little things correctly. And you hate to be cliched, but it's true. He has to execute all the little things correctly.
Right. And I always say it's a job of a coach to put players in position to succeed. I didn't make that up. Obviously, that's a big coaching mantra. So I agree with you, Adam. I'm also curious to see what bag of tricks or where Kellen Moore goes to come up with offensive production without A.J. Brown.
Yes, and I want to add this. I agree. It's going to be a challenge for Kellen, but and Jalen cannot force the issue. Okay, I don't have A.J. Brown. I got to do more. Just let the game. This is all the talks I've had with quarterback coaches over the years where they're without a key. It could be a tight end or receiver, their top guy. Sometimes quarterbacks put too much on their plate where they feel the pressure to perform at a higher level because they don't have that guy and you want to do more than that's there. Just take it, what's there. And that was what happened last year. Sometimes I thought Jalen was trying too hard. Some of the people we talked to last year felt that. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting test.
The term "manage the game" is often seen as a negative, pejorative term when it comes to quarterbacks, but it's really what the quarterback position is. You have to see how the game plays out, and what I mean by that is, let's say it's not a high-scoring game. Let's say it's 13-10 in the third quarter. That's where both Kellen Moore and Jalen have to understand game situations 100%. That's where if you're Jalen and it's 3rd and 9 and you just don't see it, you don't try to force a throw because the game doesn't dictate that you have to do that. That's what managing a game is. Managing game does not mean you're not asking your quarterback to do anything, but you want your quarterback to understand every situation so that he doesn't take a negative play in a close game. So we'll see how it plays out, but that's could be the way it plays out. We don't know that, but that could be the way it plays out.
Greg makes a good point. They have other things they can do. Will Shipley, though, he's fascinating because Geoff, Andrew DiCecco and I talked about this with our Patreon members during the week. Once Will got over his drops and it's a couple maybe rookie jitters in training camp, man, he took off as a receiver. Greg, did you notice him in Clemson catching the football?
Oh yeah, I love Shipley. I love Shipley's tape at Clemson. I watched him for 2 years. It's just he's not big enough to be a quote unquote feature back, but he runs like a feature back. He just can't, carry the ball that many times because of his size. But he's a really good football player. You can run him as a regular back. You can split him from the outside. He's a really impressive football player. He can block. He's just a really good player who's just not big enough to be, your number one back. But I think there's a place for Shipley, even when everybody's healthy. Now, I'm not saying he's going to play 35 snaps a game, but you saw last week he did get some snaps. I think the pony package personally is going to be something we're going to see more of as the season progresses.
Yeah, I think the 2 rookies who played limited roles that you look to see if there's expansion tonight are Will Shipley and Cooper DeJean. You just think that there's an opportunity for them to kind of incrementally get more snaps as the weeks go by.
With another week of practice, another day of practice. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, look, they drafted Mitchell in the 1st round and DeJean in the 2nd round. We know about Mitchell already. He's playing. They didn't draft Cooper DeJean, and we know he was injured, and obviously that slows down progress. But they didn't draft him to play 5 snaps a game.
Right. Adam, what is your understanding on the play calling situation on defense for the Falcons? Is Jimmy Lake the play caller, or has Raheem Morris, who obviously is a defensive coach and a defensive back's mind, right? Is he more part of the what goes on a snap to snap basis?
I thought it's Raheem's defense. I believe he's calling it. Jimmy Lake's his right-hand man. Also, who's on that staff, and he's actually a holdover, is Jerry Gray.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jerry Gray's been in. I remember. I'm so old, and Greg knows this. I remember Jerry Gray as a safety, right?
So do I. Yeah, and he's considered a really good DB coach, by the way.
Yeah. So he's there. So they're in good hands. The defense is they got an interesting scheme. And Greg just talked about it. And the other thing is their safeties are probably the tallest tandem in the NFL. Two safeties over 6'1". That's pretty tall. That's pretty long. That won't be easy.
And by the way, Jimmy Lake himself is known as a very good.
He's a really good DB coach. That was his claim to fame at the University of Washington.
Right.
And the one thing about him is all his corners, when they came out of Washington, they're physical, they're competitive, they're tough. Think of Trent McDuffie, Kyler Gordon in Chicago now, but you can even go back.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are
Marcus Peters.
Yeah, they're physical, competitive players.
Right. So let's talk about then that defense, which in general played well. But Greg, you did see some connections between Fields and Pickens, really. If you're going to find the big plays, they happened with Justin Fields finding George Pickens. I know a couple of those catches were just George Pickens is a very good receiver.
Yeah, they had one that where Pickens did beat Terrell on a vertical, throw. But other than that, it wasn't like Pickens was, he had a lot of, quick, short throws.
Right. So you generally were impressed by the Falcons secondary? I mean, they have a very good corner.
Well, they were playing,
I know it's
playing
tough.
a very detailed passing game.
Right.
So it's again, this is one of those early season games, Geoff, where it's hard to take much away from how the Falcons played week 1 tactically against that opponent, and now how they're going to play against the Eagles. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean they're going to have a whole brand new defense. Obviously no team can do that, but playing against the Steelers and now playing against the Eagles, it's 2 different animals. I mean, it's hard to really take a ton away. They didn't really have to line up and play the passing game very much.
Right. I in all honesty, and not to make fun of the Steelers at all, but I called Adam after watching that game, and I said, how Greg sometimes uses the word that was a really tough watch.
Yeah, that's it.
And I described a play action that they ran that was really just a 2-man route. I think it was the first quarter. and the Falcons just happened to drop 7. So one of the routes was I think Pickens, who was behind the line of scrimmage in the flat. So they only have one option to throw the ball forward against 7 dropping. And I said, how is Justin Fields supposed to be?
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that, because one note I typed was the way this game played out. The Steelers' offensive staff was able to hide Fields as a passer. The Steelers had almost no drop back pass game, and they didn't need it to win the game.
Right.
So, it's very hard to get a feel for the Falcons' true pass defense against the Steelers.
Right. All right. Finishing off offense. We did see motion. We saw formational.
Talking about the Eagles offense, right?
Yeah, Eagles offense against this Falcons defense. So we did see we saw the motion, we saw the trips, we saw the bunch formations.
Oh, yeah.
I know we talked about what happens if you don't have A.J. Brown, what happens if you don't have Johnny Wilson, but coach is coach. They do what they do. They try to adapt to their personnel. But I would imagine, Greg, we would still see that level of formational diversity and motion involvement with this offense against the Falcons.
You will definitely see motion. That's built into how they've practiced, I'm sure, from day one, going back to OTAs and mini camps. Yeah, that's not going to change. They'll use motion. I mean, look, as we all know, last year I think they used the least amount of motion in the NFL. In week 1, they used quite a bit of it. I think that's just part of the offense. I don't think that's going to change.
What did you notice from Dotson last week on those snaps?
Not a lot, and I'm being honest. I mean, he played a good number of snaps, but I didn't really notice him a lot at all. So he didn't get a lot of targets, obviously. So it just, he was just out there. And to be honest, I was trying to notice him, but he didn't really do anything. So it's hard to know. I mean, he's going to, I liked him a lot coming out of Penn State. I really liked him. And we all know he had a really good rookie season when it looked like he was on his way to becoming not necessarily a big time number 1. He's not that guy, but a quality NFL receiver. And, I don't know what happened in Washington. New staffs always see things differently. I certainly don't know the kid. But, in terms of pure talent and toughness and competitiveness, I mean, Geoff, you saw him play at Penn State. He made a ton of catches for a smaller receiver in the middle of the field. He was a tough kid.
He was.
I don't know, like I said, I don't know what happened, but it's there in his body to be a good player.
Right. All right. Well, we'll see. Was it you who pointed out to our Patreon members in the chat that he lined up incorrectly on the wheel route?
On the Barkley touchdown, he initially lined up in the wrong place, and Hurts had to tell him to go where he had to go because he was the motion man. Right. So he lined up, but that's to be expected. I mean, when you have a lot of motion in your offense, and motion is normally not 100%, but normally motion is not about a player, it's about formation. So in other words, whoever lines up in a specific spot on a particular play call becomes the motion guy. It's not, we're only using this player in motion. That's not the way teams do it.
Right.
One thing I just want to ask Greg, right? And whether it's Dots or anyone else, then I know it's only one game, so we have to make that point, but the Falcons played a ton of zone coverage, almost the entire game.
Which is a total change from a year ago when Ryan Nielsen was the coordinator, and they were high percentage man. Among the highest in the league, quite frankly, in playing cover 1. And in week 1, they played a ton of zone, hardly any cover 1.
How do teams approach it when a number 1 receiver's out? Do they play more man or zone in your opinion?
Well, there's other factors, because don't forget, one reason they could have played high percentage zone last week too was the quarterback. Justin Fields is a runner, so you don't want to play man, you want to play zone. Obviously, Hurts can take off and run. He's not Fields, but so you don't know the answer to that. It depends on the opponent, Adam. I mean, for sure. Now there are some teams that are just man teams, and are going to play man, and they then do other things if they're playing a running quarterback, like they try to change their rush, or they use a spy or a lurk defender. But we don't know exactly what the Falcons will be yet because of the nature of their first opponent.
Raheem Morris, though, historically, has he been more zone?
He's a little bit in the Fangio school. He's leaned in that direction. So, obviously there's a lot of quarter structure and which fits their safeties really well, because those safeties are really smart, savvy, intelligent players, and they can do anything from quarter structure, and they see things really well. So I would expect that he would end up being more of a zone play. Now, keep one thing in mind, against 3-by-1 sets, and again, we'll see how much the Eagles do that tonight. Against 3-by-1 sets, you can match up Terrell as your boundary corner one-on-one with no help at all. You feel really good about that and essentially play zone throughout your secondary. So you can do a lot of that, which teams do when they feel really good about their boundary corner.
Interesting to watch for that tonight. Last thing, we didn't talk about Jalen Hurts. Obviously, the 2 interceptions we've discussed throughout the week. There were 2 other passes that could have been more. The thing that jumped out to me more though, Greg, was how well Green Bay was keyed on the quarterback run, the designed quarterback run. I mean, they played some heavy boxes. They almost seemed to be able to dictate it if they wanted to. I noticed the safety would constantly come down. They did a little, we're coming in, we're not, we're coming in, we're not with McKinney. Is that something because the Falcons employ a different defensive alignment that you think can they take from what Green Bay did and try to incorporate it into their
I think
own
every
style?
team, when they go into a game against Hurts and the Eagles, has a plan for how to defend the quarterback run game. So are they going to do tactically the exact same thing? Probably not, because you don't do the exact same thing, but they'll have a plan for that for sure. And so we'll see, but it is a different defense. I mean, the front's different. Clearly the base front is different. So although even teams that play 4-3 at times, they will put one of their linebackers on the edge and to have a 5-man front. A lot of teams do that.
Right.
One question for Greg, though. The other corner is Mike Hughes, who I remember from Minnesota, former first-round pick.
Yeah, and then Alford's the slot, which he was last year.
Right. So do you think these are guys that are beatable? What have you seen from Hughes over his career?
Hughes has always been kind of an interesting player to me because he was if I'm not mistaken, was he not a late first-round pick?
He was a first-round kickoff returner, yeah, and he tore an ACL, I think.
Yeah, he's always one reason he's still in the league. It's been a number of years is because he's got talent and he can play inside or outside. And I always thought that he had ability because he's not small. He's got good size. He's got good ability, and he always ends up somewhere, and he always ends up playing. Have you noticed that, Adam? Wherever he is, he plays. So there's something in terms of the ability, the skill set, maybe the mentality, because I think there's toughness to him. So he's their starting outside corner opposite Terrell. I mean, he played almost every snap.
He's been with the Bengals, with the Lions, right?
He's probably been with 4 or 5 teams, and because he's been in the league for a while now.
Yeah, he was. I think he was 20 when he was drafted. He's only 27 somehow.
Wow, only 27 still.
Yeah, one of those odd quirks.
God, I feel like he's 47. I mean,
I like how you said 27 still, like he's been 27 for 3 years.
He was a first rounder,
right.
He was a first rounder in 2018. He had the ACL injury, which I mentioned. Then he got traded to the Chiefs. They got down on him pretty quickly. He kept getting hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just kind of bounced around to the Chiefs, then to the Lions. Didn't get much down there. He also is a kickoff returner because he was really explosive coming out of Central Florida.
He sure was. I mean,
hurt a lot, unfortunately.
And then what are you looking at? What's his size?
5'10" and 110.
Yeah, see, he looks bigger on tape.
Plays bigger.
He was in the 6-foot range, but he just looks like a bigger guy on tape.
It's competitive, yeah. But here, the reason why I ask is, now again, we don't know exactly who's going to be a line, but receiver yet, other than Devontae Smith for the Eagles due to the other injuries. But if they had a full house, this is a game I'd be spreading them out because D. Alford's a former undrafted free agent. Do you like him at all as a nickel? Has he played?
I mean, I haven't studied him personally, so I'm not going to say, but he was their starting nickel a year ago, and obviously the new coaching staff kept him as the nickel. So he must be doing something right. Like I don't want to speak out of school because I haven't charted Alford.
Yeah,
but he made it through a new coaching staff, and he's the starting nickel.
Jeff, he's a former undrafted free agent out of Tusculum.
Oh, your favorite college, Tusculum.
Greg, was it Ricardo Coakley? Did he go there? Do you remember him?
I know that there's one prominent alumni.
Second round corner for the Steelers in like 2002.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Who else went to Tusculum, Jeff? There's some other player. I can't remember. Anyway.
I'll get our fact checking staff on that.
Yeah. Do we have one? Yeah.
NFL players
news
from
on that. Let's transition as we talk about this matchup tonight between the Eagles and the Falcons. We'll talk about this Falcons offense because that had to have been a tough watch for you, Greg. I know. Granted, it's like the opposite conversation. They were going up against a really good defense that the Steelers have, but Kirk Cousins really comes under the microscope. It was his first game with the Falcons, and as most people who've watched Kirk Cousins throughout the years I think the two obvious things that jump out at you are, one is he's coming off an Achilles. Does he look right? And two, he's playing in an offense now that you're just not normally used to seeing Kirk Cousins in, which is a shotgun.
Well, he was only under
based
center
offense.
one time.
Right.
Which, again, could that have been a function of his Achilles? We don't know the answer to that as we go forward, but I don't see Cousins. I mean, obviously every quarterback is in the shotgun now. I'm not saying there's never a shotgun, but I think he's a good play action quarterback under center. I've always felt that was a strength of his game. So again, we'll see with another week of practice, an extra week, just theoretically getting better. We'll see what they do, but the thing that struck me was he just didn't look real comfortable throwing the football. And, that's not an X and O point, but, I thought that he was under a lot of pressure too, by the way, throughout the game. We'll get to that in a sec, but I thought he looked a little stiff-legged. He didn't really have the knee bend that you see from Cousins. He just didn't look really comfortable.
Have you typically seen, and this is a tough question, but you watch so much tape, it may jump out to you, when a quarterback who is used to playing in more conventional style offenses goes and plays in this, more motion-based, pistol-based, shotgun-based offense, is it common to see struggles like that, or just an uncomfortability with everything going on in front?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, but the reason I think that it could have been a function of still his Achilles is Zach Robinson is the OC. And Zach Robinson is a young OC. People might remember him. He was an Oklahoma State quarterback, pretty good college player.
Yeah.
It really wasn't that long ago. And he came from the Rams, okay? And the Rams with McVay, I mean, they have a run game foundation with the quarterback under center. And they have obviously a back in Bijan Robinson who's really, really good. But that's what surprised me a bit, which made me think it might be still a function of the injury because, that style offense, you put the quarterback under center a meaningful amount and you use the run game and the play action pass game, and they didn't really do that. So, was it a function of his injury? Again, we don't know the answer to that, but that was not what I expected to see.
See, Geoff, he talked about it and he kind of brushed back because everyone saw this, right? What's Greg's talking about, whether it's Chase Daniel or anyone else who watched the game. And he kind of shot back, said, no, we've been doing this since the spring. This is planned. And he, whatever the case may be, but
he's going to say that no matter what the deal.
Exactly. Because I talked to John T. Filippo about it and they didn't do that when he knows Kirk likes to be under center. So
he's a rhythm player. He's weird. He's just so people understand about quarterback play, quarterbacks can get much more into a rhythm with their drop, their set, their throws from under center. And a lot of quarterbacks prefer to be under center because of that, because it gives them that rhythmic. It's all rhythm. It's like a lot of things in sports. You get into a rhythm. The shotgun is not quite the same.
Right. I mean, I know nowadays in college, Greg, a lot of college quarterbacks these days come out of these shotgun-based offenses.
That's because that's the way they're taught from the time they're 10 years old.
Right. Kirk at Michigan State
footwork is awful because they're never taught how to drop back.
Right. But at Michigan State, Kirk was not in that kind of offense. I think at the time he was there, it was more of a conventional pro-style offense
without
that
question.
he was used to. Yeah.
And that's what he's been much of his NFL career.
Right. Even his first days in Washington with Jay Gruden, even though McVay, I think, was on that staff, they had a lot of those guys on that staff or about to be on that staff. That offense was a West Coast offense.
Why do you think Kyle Shanahan always liked him? Because it's that style of offense. Get under center, use the play action pass game. I mean, and they can do that. They have a back. I mean, Bijan Robinson is a big time talent now. Big time talent.
All right, so we'll have to see. I mean, I made this point during the week, maybe the Eagles are getting the Falcons at the right time, meaning that they're just not comfortable yet offense. Zach Robinson has to learn a little more about Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
Kirk Cousins may have to learn more about operating this offense, and it may take a few weeks. And again, none of us know if the Achilles is truly an issue or not. I did know, I think it was Chase Daniel who did say he was standing different. Like when you're in the shotgun, you normally have one foot, so your left foot forward, right? And he felt that Kirk Cousins' plant foot was in reverse. It was almost like he had the right foot.
He would know more about that than I. What I did notice, though, is he was very stiff-legged. And that's it's hard to play when you're stiff-legged. So, again, we don't know the answer. But the other issue that they had, which obviously they played a good Steelers front. Anytime you're playing a front that has T.J. Watt, and there are other really good players on that Steelers front. The second-year player from Wisconsin, Keanu Benton, is going to be a really good player.
Yes.
Highsmith is a really nice player who doesn't get a lot of publicity because he's on the other side of Watt. But their O-line, which is good. I mean, in terms of the players, had a poor performance overall, not just the right tackle, McGarry. I mean, obviously, when you're playing against T.J. Watt, a lot of guys have not great performances. But the Lindstrom, who's a really good player, had a really poor game. Really poor game. And
didn't he come out for a little bit?
What's that?
Did he not come out for a little bit in that game and then came back in later? I thought he was replaced for
that. I can't remember. But,
okay.
But the point is that he's a really good player, and they actually have a really good O-line, and you'd have to assume they're going to play better. I mean, they're good players and they're good. I mean, they were just not good week one.
Right. And Larry Ogunjobi gave him fits, as I understand, in that game. He also had a good game from the interior of the Steelers defensive line. So, Geoff, on what Greg just said, moving this forward, it's not like the Eagles don't have the type of personnel that could have a game like that in terms of, okay, you got the two young kids in the middle, a D tackle. Milt Williams, is a good stout run defender. It's the other guys who've got to really bring it on. And look, we know Bryce Huff's been paying a lot of money. He's got to start getting it done.
Yeah, well, let's discuss the run defense element that you just brought up, Adam, because the Eagles clearly had some issues, both with tackling, gap integrity, as the Packers rolled up 163 rushing yards and averaged 7.8 per carry. Now, if you say, well, that's not fair because Jaden Reed had a 33-yard touchdown carry. Well, it counts. It was a rush, and a lot of people were out of position and blocked out of the play. But even still, Josh Jacobs averaged over 5 yards per carry at 16 rushes for 84 yards. And Emmanuel Wilson came out of nowhere for 46. Greg, I mean, I'll leave it to you. I did watch. I felt like you saw some similar issues with Jordan Davis as the game went on. The impact and the effectiveness was not there. And that would be a big concern if that continues.
It is a concern. I spoke to someone in the building, and they're concerned, by the way. He has too many run game snaps in which he played too high. That prevents him from playing off blocks. See, it's funny. When I did Jordan Davis coming out, and you guys will remember this, I said that he was very strong, but he was not powerful. And of course, I got ripped because it's Jordan Davis. He ran a 4.82 at the combine. He can, climb tall buildings in a single bound. I mean, you know the whole deal.
Superman.
Right. But there's a difference between strength and power. Strength is being able to hold a spot, okay? Power is strength in motion. And Jordan Davis is not good at power. Every once in a while, you'll see a bull rush, he'll do that. But the thing that he has to be able to do is play off blocks. What he does is he just holds his ground, and that's okay. That's step one. But now you've got to play off blocks and make plays. And he doesn't do that. And he hasn't really done that with any kind of consistency since he's been an Eagle. And he still is not, he played, I believe, 35 snaps. He's still not a pass rusher. Right. So, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. We know a lot of people are slipping on that field in Brazil, but he's going to have to play better. And like I said, there is concern about Jordan Davis.
Let me say this though, Greg. I distinctly remember you doing our pregame show last year, and you were so excited. You said, guys, I got to bring up Jordan Davis. And what you had said, he got off to a really good start, and then obviously he would fade. But you seemed to think he might have been on his way, and then you can't predict this.
And then he stopped.
Fell off.
Yeah. So again, I don't know. I can't answer why. That's just what the tape shows. I know he's lost weight, but the next step in his development is he must play off contact rather than just stalemating all linemen. He's got to be able to do that. You've got to be able. Look, I'm going to give you an example, and obviously I watch, and particularly the first week of the season, I try to get through as many games as I can, and it's hard. I can't 16 games. It's hard because it takes me 2.5 hours just to get through one side of a ball because I do it in detail. But I watch the defense for the Tennessee Titans, and Tavondre Sweat, another big, 360-pound defensive tackle. I mean, he looked quick. He looked explosive. He was playing off blocks. He was making plays in the run game. Jordan Davis has not, with a few exceptions in his career with the Eagles, which is now year 3, we haven't seen him do very much of that.
Right.
Mm.
Right. I think we've been down that same road as far as our sort of analysis. Adam and I have talked to coaches and players, and we've talked about the difference between being in shape and being conditioned to play in an NFL game. Jordan Davis lost, we were told he lost the weight. He
Right.
came to camp in shape. That was a good first start. But there's a difference between being that and then being conditioned to show that you can play more snaps and be more effective. So he might be in shape right now, but he did not yet proven again. It was one game and guys were falling, but just by the snap count alone, not conditioned enough to be a very impactful first round like player
Right.
on the field for a long enough time. And I think you can see the run game that the Packers had and make a connection there.
But I would argue, I think it's more of a technique thing, to be honest with you.
You could be right.
The technique is.
But don't you think he loses technique when he's when he's tired?
Sure,
You're going to
of course.
stand, but the problem, Adam,
Right.
is if you're going to stand upright and play upright, it doesn't matter how strong you are or any of that in the NFL. That
Get
doesn't
blocked.
work.
No, I'm agreeing with it. What my point is, I don't think it has anything to do with conditioning. We're in week 1, okay? We just had week 1. Bad technique is bad technique. He's had this issue since he was drafted. Yes, it got progressively worse when the conditioning got lost as last season went along. But we're talking about week 1 where the technique was not good enough, and he's got a really good defensive line coach in Clint Hurt, who's very highly regarded around the NFL, and he coached for Vic in Chicago. So as we said at Geoff 3 months ago, if Clint Hurt can't get Jordan Davis going, I don't think anyone can.
And he's had moments. Look, I remember the Buffalo game last year, and I'm not talking about running down Josh Allen. He had, I can still see in my mind's eye 5 or 6 run plays last year where he just looked like, and I thought to myself, wow, this is a step in the right direction. He really looked good. He's had moments, but it's just not enough.
Right. So Jalen Carter is certainly someone who's had good moments, and he had good moments against the Packers as well. Also was it a PAT or a field goal where he had a roughness call against him? Adam, he did something on a special teams play that was not great, and he got flagged again in the game. He did. Sure he plays under
Carter
control.
did. Yeah, Carter got a bad penalty. Yes, yeah. In fact, they pointed it out on the broadcast.
Right.
About how you can't do that. Yeah, because they always get the last guy,
Yeah. Yeah. Greg, what did you notice from Jalen Carter against the Packers?
Not a whole lot. I thought the guy who stood out more in terms of just looking at individual plays was Ajomo.
Right.
Big pass really rush in the fourth quarter. To see if he starts to get more snaps, because it's the NFL. The guys who are producing are going to start playing more. And you guys know how I felt about Ajomo coming out of Texas. I thought that his college tape was way better than a 7th round pick. I can't speak to why he was a 7th round pick, but I'm really curious to see, because he also had some really good snaps in the preseason as well.
Hey, right. Geoff, here's the thing with Vic Fangio. He doesn't care how much someone's been paid. He doesn't care where they were drafted. Greg just touched on it. He's going to play the guys who can get the job done. He's not worried about maybe what the front office thinks, because they want to see their players play.
No, Vic's been around too long, and he's not Mr. Warm and fuzzy.
Right. Well, so I love that we're bringing this up, because that brings the conversation back to the secondary, right? As you go up against a Falcons offense that has some pretty good weapons. You have Kyle Pitts, who is a very good tight end. He seems to be back, caught a touchdown, right? They're obviously pretty decent at wide receiver as well. Drake London. This goes back to me with the Avonte Maddox conversation. Are you going to play Avonte Maddox in the slot today and maybe get some really awkward mismatches, perhaps even against Kyle Pitts, when you're Vic Fangio and you're Mr. You have to perform? You could argue Avonte Maddox's performance against Green Bay did not warrant yet another run in the nickel. So we'll see if the leash was that short, and if Rodgers plays the outside in nickel and Mitchell moves inside today, especially based on the matchups, because if that's how Vic Fangio is, I don't know that Avonte Maddox deserves to be on the field again.
Yeah, Greg talked about it really in the first part of our show.
They like to run outside. If let's say they're in 11 personnel, they're going to run outside and they'll attack the slot. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But this is a team that likes the wide zone run game, and they attack the edges.
So this will be a big responsibility a week later for Nakobe Dean and for Zach Bond. Zach Bond, Greg, had a really interesting debut, made a lot of tackles. I mean, his stat line almost looked like a 90s linebacker with a Jeremiah Trotter, 15 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 pass defend. I mean, he really came into his own in that game. He made Vic look like a genius.
He played really well, and I thought he showed a really quick trigger, which, in some ways I was surprised. I mean, his key and diagnose I thought was really good. He was sudden in his movement. He showed really good confined space quickness. I thought Bond really showed up. And then, Dean clearly has an excellent feel as a gap shooter. I think that's his game. There's a downfield suddenness to him. That's the way downhill suddenness. That's the way he plays. I think that's the strength of his game.
Awesome. So if the Eagles are going to get their pass rush going, as we'll close out here, where's it going to be? You mentioned this Falcons offensive line, pretty good all around, nice interior guys, good exterior guys. They're paying Bryce Huff a lot of money. They put a first round pick into Nolan Smith. They got Josh Sweat. Where is it going to come from, Greg, if they're going to manufacture some today? Or is it going to be Vic Fangio and his sim pressures just trying to cook something up that Kirk Cousins is not ready for?
Well, if he doesn't feel like they can get a pass rush out of 4, you're going to start, out of normal 4 D linemen, you're going to start seeing more sim pressures. Obviously they didn't really have much of a pass rush in the last game. They're counting on Huff for that. Again, we have to maybe account for the field. Maybe it wasn't the best field for it. But they're counting on Huff. They're certainly counting on Sweat. I'd be hard pressed from what I've seen on tape to count on Nolan Smith, but I assume they're going to keep putting him out there. He did play 30 snaps or so last week. So I guess we'll see. I mean, you'd like to be in a position where you can rush the quarterback with your 4 down linemen. But if you can't, then you have to do other things because you've got to impact the quarterback somewhere along the line. You can't just let the quarterback drop back and be comfortable.
On that, BG played more snaps than a couple other edge rushers.
Played over 30 snaps.
Yeah. So I'm not expecting that at 36 years old. Greg, did you notice anything with him on BG?
I mean, I knew he was out there, but their pass rush overall was not really very good. So, they're going to need a lot more from their pass rush.
Gotcha.
So here's an interesting thought as we talk about the leash and long, right? Jalix Hunt was a guy who seemed to play above expectation in both training camp and preseason.
Well, I noticed him on preseason
knowledge of the game. Yeah. Here's a guy who was inactive, as we all kind of thought he would be when he was drafted, right? Project. But then as camp and preseason showed, and Greg, you even said you observed it, the kid had a good feel for the game and clearly has the athleticism off the edge. You wonder, it's just week 2, so we don't get crazy, but what's it take to get Jalix Hunt active and maybe into the game and into the rotation?
If this continues, I mean, if they continue to have issues rushing the passer, they're going to do whatever they have to do because this is what coaches do. Yeah, he'll absolutely be active at some point in the first half of the season. Don't forget they have the bye week 5, so they could continue to get him up to speed. But yeah, again, as you said, Geoff, it's only 1 week. It's only one game.
But I will say this, based on last year, based on preseason, and based on week 1, I think Nolan Smith has a lot of work to do. And if it doesn't change, it'll be very interesting to see, what, because they'll have a decision to make, particularly if Jalix Hunt continues to improve. Because you're talking about a kid who's 6'3", 6'4", 255, and a superior athlete now. Now, again, maybe he's not ready for the NFL game yet, playing in a small school, playing safety early in his career in college, I believe at Cornell. So, maybe he's not ready yet in terms of the overall requirements of being an edge pass rusher in the NFL, but he's certainly a big, gifted athlete.
One more for you, Greg. Byron Young out of the University of Alabama, who
I watched him coming out. Yeah.
Let's talk about him. I know, look, they don't need him to be active right now, but as Geoff just suggested, what if they're not getting a good interior pass rush at some point?
Well, I think in terms of how he can be deployed, he's a lot like Milton Williams. He can play multiple positions along your defensive front. I think that's the kind of player he is. He's not a pure pass rusher, although it's not as if he can't do it. Just like Milton Williams, you wouldn't say, man, that guy's just a dominant inside pass rusher, but he can rush the quarterback. So I think they're somewhat similar style players.
All right, well, we've broken this game down from A to Z, and now it's time to do the most difficult thing at all, and that's be accurate with our pick. You guys both got the opener wrong. You picked the Packers. I not only picked the Eagles to win, but I also picked Saquon Barkley to be MVP. I'm usually the one in last place chasing you guys, so you guys will have to catch up this week. Greg, I'm gonna start with you. How do you see this game unfolding, and who is going to be the MVP?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to have to be somewhat of a Saquon Barkley game. You never know how games turn out. You watch games every Sunday, and particularly early in the season, you're just surprised. I wouldn't say surprised, but you say, oh, I didn't really expect that to happen. I think it's going to have to be a Saquon Barkley game. My sense is, barring anything unforeseen, and there's always a chance for big plays on either side. We know that. But I don't see this as the kind of game that's going to be, a 35-30 kind of game. So I'm going to pick Saquon Barkley. And I think the Eagles will win this game, but I think it's going to be more like a 20-13 kind of game.
Okay, good stuff. 20-13, Saquon Barkley MVP. Adam, how do you see this game unfolding?
Yeah, look, I see a low scoring game. The line Sunday night was, I think it dropped from 6.5 to 6. But it's funny, I see it as a 6 or 7 point game. I'm going to go 20. I'm going to go 23-17. Okay, it's one of these games where scoring should be at a premium. Kirk Cousins struggled last week. Maybe the Eagles could get to him. I believe in Kellen Moore. I see him figuring out a way to get this done. But man, the guy that I see getting it done is going to be Dallas Goedert. They got to use him, move him around, create matchups, winnable matchups. Without AJ Brown, he's going to be their physical presence in the passing game, and I like Goedert this week.
All right, so we have the opposite here. This time, I'm going to go with the Falcons. I like the Eagles all week, but
wow.
AJ Brown is just so important, beating the blitz, being that safety valve. And I know Devontae Smith had a great game when AJ Brown was out against the Bucs, but the offense in general was not. I get it; it's a new offense, new plan. I like this Falcons defense, though. So I would originally have taken the Eagles, but I'm now leaning Atlanta in also a low scoring game. Falcons win 23-20. Bijan Robinson will be the MVP.
That's a good choice if you're going to pick the Falcons. We've had 2 backs in the first 2 weeks with 30 or more rushes. You don't see that very much in the NFL these days. We had Joe Mixon week 1. We had Josh Jacobs week 2. This weekend, that's a lot of carries. In some ways, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened with Barkley, but I guess we'll find out.
We will find out. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds pregame show. Just want to thank all the great viewers and listeners that we've had over the past week for Inside the Birds, for the the tape breakdown show with Greg Cosell, Q&A, Gone on One. We've set records for numbers this week, and we're just really, really proud of that and just appreciative of all of our viewers and our listeners, and of course our great Patreon community. So with that being said, for Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching the Inside the Birds pregame show. Enjoy your football tonight, everybody.